Okay, welcome to the meeting of the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee on Wednesday, the 15th of June 2022. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies have been received from Councillor Cousin and Councillor Maynard.
Yep. Do we have to accept those?
Yep.
Yeah. Any declarations of interest? Thank you. Report. Nothing specific to say that isn't later on the agenda. Public questions in accordance with Standing Order 22.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes. Confirm the minutes of the committee meeting held on 9th of March 2022. Are there any comments on? Thank you.
Which?
Yeah, right. Minutes of other meetings with Corporate Policy and Finance Committee, Accounts and Risk Subcommittee, 20th of April 2022. Councillor Turnbull.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. It's a pleasure in presenting the minutes of the meeting of the Accounts and Subcommittee, Risk Subcommittee held on the 26th of April 2022 for noting.
Any comments? Right, officers' reports, forward planner and resolution.
Thank you, Chair. So all the items on the resolution tracker from our last meeting has been marked as complete, and just been noting really the main item I think for us at the next meeting in September will be when we start looking at the first look of the budget for next year. Happy to take any other questions.
Just a quick question, the timetable for approving any salary increases for staff, but do you have any idea what's the timetable that's working to?
No, unfortunately not. I'm afraid it changes every year.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
I assume that will be one of the major potential impacts on the first look. Have some assumptions around.
That's correct. So I think the way we've done it in the past, Chair, is by taking the previous years as a starting point, and just because it's a best guess. Obviously, we can have that debate then, but you're right, that will be the biggest driver of the budget.
Inflation, presumably.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we happy to note the forward planner and resolution tracker?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Terms of reference. Finance Officer.
Thank you, Chair. So there's no changes to the terms of reference from when we looked at it last year. It's just bringing it forward just for some good governance to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to read it and ask any questions or challenge it if there's any amendments that councillors would like to put forward.
Any questions on terms of reference? Okay, we're all happy to agree on terms of reference? Thank you. Right. Budgetary control provisional outturn 2021-2022.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, it's unlikely to occur, but the reason why the report is called the provisional outturn is because if our external auditors come back and ask for some changes, then things may change, but it's very unlikely. But just to confirm, that's why it's provisional. There won't be any other changes other than those requested by audit in the unlikely event, hopefully. I think the most important thing I think to draw your attention to is on page 18, which summarises the variances for the whole year. So the bigger figures, so overall, we've got a variance of 835,000, which sounds like a massive figure, but just to confirm at the top, 752 of those relate to projects where they hadn't been completed in year, so those funds are allocated for this financial year, 2022-23. So it's just a timing issue with those
And
items.
still, I suggest more than just allocated, in some cases legally committed.
In some cases, yes.
Yeah.
And the remaining 84,000 variance is broken down in the table. Of that 84, where we've reviewed the earmarked reserves, so 64,000 of that 84 has been allocated to specific projects in the earmarked reserves, with the remaining 20 being put to the general reserve to make sure that that's still increasing as our budgets are increasing, that we are very conscious of the fact that the general reserve should be increasing in line with it, with everything. But I mean, I'm happy to take any further questions.
Questions? Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I've got some questions that all kind of linked to commercial and other income. So what caught my eye was we've got in the favourable variances, we've got a general income favourable variance of additional grant income.
Can I ask what page?
Yeah, sorry, page 18. Yeah,
SSP, sorry, page.
yeah, yes, favourable variances. So we've got towards the bottom of the favourable variances, general income, additional grant income, and the sale of the old vehicle. And we've talked before about increased admin charge for memorial benches. That comes to 6,000 favourable. I was just trying to understand that with the adjusted budget and provisional outcome for other income. So commercial income remained almost identically the same, 280,000 to 300 and something. But other income is up by about 27,000. And then in the favourable variance, it's about 6,000. So I'm just kind of wondering where the other 20,000 positive has come in. What other income have we got that?
So it'll be where that's all grouped together. The other bits and pieces will be things like the Oktoberfest, where that wasn't budgeted for.
Okay. So they were
So-
new events that weren't planned for. Okay. So
So-
even in the adjusted budget. Okay.
And with the commercial income, it's worth bearing in mind that there were things that reduced that didn't meet the target, but then other things that meant it came back up. So, for example, the parking didn't meet the target, but then we had other things like Oktoberfest that wasn't budgeted for, that meant it was closer to the target.
Okay. So yeah, in other words, it's almost in terms of the commercial income being almost identical to 80 and a few hundred. That's to some extent to offsetting numbers.
Yeah.
Because the Oktoberfest is part of commercial income.
Yeah.
There's other income I was interested in. Other income is up by, from the adjusted budget, if you're on page 17.
In 254 to 281.
Yeah, 25440 goes to 281102. That's about 27,000, 26,500. And I was just tracking that along because that's a good positive that we've got there with other income. But then when we go to favourable variances, specifically on income, it says just 6,000.
What's probably best, I can have a quick look now, or I can come back to you.
I mean, you can come back to me, it's favourable. I'm not concerned.
It's just the way things have
I'm
been.
sure it's taking another pot, absolutely. I was just, it just comes up a bit.
Yes.
Later on, I'm going to ask a question about our non-operational asset, which wasn't where we had the two cottages, and that's also the income in there. So I was kind of intrigued by income, caught my eye a bit. Yes. So thanks for. And could you just while we're on, could you just help me with what we define as commercial income? What's other income? So other income will obviously be grants, and commercial income will be parking, as you said, hire a park hall, all of the various rentals for the public realm and all those other elements, you know, and events like Oktoberfest and Common. What other things go into other income other than grants?
So we've got
just the big items really.
So it is very small and it is grants and recharges. So if there's, it's not big money particularly, but it's like skip hire for helping events and things like that. The main movement was the contribution that we received from Park for the Rothampton play area. That was the reason for the big.
That's why other income is large this year. So
Yeah.
over 250,000. Normally, you're saying it's quite a small number.
Yeah.
For those small reasons. So largely, this is what we call it. It's normally the income we're getting, which we net off our budget, is the commercial income.
Yeah.
Largely, just happens to be this year because of Park's contribution. Thank you. That's so, you know, in that sense, that's made me realise it's not normally such an issue. I'm trying to work out why I didn't know what other income was until this year. So it's really one big one-off item. Thank you.
I think that's a fair question. Let's look at the difference there. So the difference on the detailed schedule. I think it is probably because here something's been grossed up and then it's been netted down.
Yeah.
And I imagine things like the Rothamsted Park contribution has been netted off in capital projects.
Yeah.
That's a bit, but I think it's a fair enough question.
Okay, no, it's just me.
Yeah,
For a
yeah,
structure,
that's fine. I can confirm that.
That's fine. Other questions? I would just make a comment that the good news here was that obviously we planned to use £75,000 of the reserves. And in actual fact, because of the variable variance that have arisen on the non-capital account, then in actual fact, we've effectively not had to use that at all. And as you say, we've added back to general reserves, which should enable us to keep to the 5 months of general reserves inflated. I think that's a good result given all the uncertainties of the year. And that's what we've had. So I think that's a good result. Most of the savings, though, as I see here, are one-off, so they're not likely to repeat into the current year, so they don't probably have an impact on the budget for this year.
That's correct, Chair. So where you've got things like the best example, I think, is the grounds maintenance contract, where we had a saving in financial years, right? Saving in the previous financial year, but where we've taken those assets on, will be charged for them in 22-23. So it was a one-off saving.
Okay. So if you could provide council and the rest of the committee with a sort of general definition of other and commercial income, a fair question, and also the discrepancy between the 27 and the 6.
Absolutely.
Discrepancy is the wrong word. The variance.
Yeah.
Something nefarious, which I'm sure that is. Right, then, are we happy to note the report?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Okay, year-end accounts.
Thank you, Chair. So for the financial year 2021-22, we're in a strong financial position, as we've said, with 20,000 being added to the general reserves, which gives us more than the 5 months of net revenue expenditure. I'd also like to point out that there's been a review of the earmark reserves to ensure that all the existing ones are still fit for purpose and none pressures have been reflected in them. And obviously, as we've kind of spoken about already, as much as it is good news that we're in this financial position, I think there's going to be a challenging year and a challenging budget setting to come. But I have to take any further questions.
Absolutely. Question.
Mine's about the non-operational assets. I mentioned them a bit earlier.
Yeah.
I previously had picked up their existence, and you were very clear. You mentioned it's 2 cottages. Yeah, page 9 is the description of it. Page 8 is the amount. Page 19,000. Page 9 at the top. Those parts of the common which are let on lease or license include 2 cottages. So I imagine that's the largest some of the 892 cottages. So described as cottages so that they're habitable, are they?
I believe so, yes. They're
attached to the golf club.
they are, yeah.
Are they? Okay, yeah.
I don't think they are let out. I think, Paul, I'm sorry.
That's right, no, please.
I'm pretty sure they are inhabited.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we let them out at some sort of commercial rate to whoever's residing there, was it?
No, we don't receive any income for them. It's part of the relationship with the golf course. So they're ours, but it's all kind of managed by the golf course.
Does the golf course, I'm asking with deeper questions there, does the golf course, what is it staff? Does it put some of its staff on, lower paid staff on there or whatever it's a bit?
I assume so. I'm not 100% sure who actually lives in them. I can certainly find out though.
I mean, it was obviously before my time in my it just seems a bit sort of, I mean, I'm aware we have a golf course club there and they pay us some sort of.
Yeah, they pay an annual fee.
Yeah.
Is a large part of that the value of the cottages?
Yes, there's a split between the actual course and the cottages.
Because I did a quick estimate, sorry, if it was habitable and roughly on a value of 890,000, I'd expect us at a market rate to get about, I don't know exactly the size, but 30 to 40,000 a year from the cottages. Now, if we're getting that money from the golf course and we weren't expecting anything else, then that's reasonable. But in a time of a kind of housing crisis, we shouldn't be letting the golf club.
I was going to say this, and I can't really remember, Paul, and you'll be able to find out, because I'm just not sure how long the tenants might have been sitting there.
Okay.
And so I've no idea. I'm just saying it may be that they've been tenants, and what terms are they? May have been there a very long time.
I don't think I've been here 3 years. The only time I've ever heard about the golf club and our arrangements was actually when it was during the pandemic, when at some point there was a reference to what the suspension of them paying because they weren't earning income. Can't remember how that was resolved or not, but it didn't come up again. So I've never seen that, and I thought if we're sort of reviewing our assets and we're also thinking about budget getting tight, we ought to at least
I think that's a fair.
look at it.
Yes, I think, Paul, but can you remember that, casting my mind back an awfully long time now, like almost 16 years, at some point, I think there was a renewal of the lease, which is long term. So it may all fit in with that. I don't know because I'm no expert on it, but I know it was, I think the lease was renegotiated quite a good many years ago, wasn't it?
I assume it's treated as part of the golf club income
Yes.
development,
Yes,
and it's probably used by the lower grade.
yeah.
I think it's worth that if you come back, give us the fact we can conjecture about it
Yes.
some
Yeah.
time. But I mean, I suspect it's all part of a long-term lease, and that lease was probably set at such a period that the market rates, which you're correctly referring to, are somewhat out of date.
Yes.
Won't be much. So the next question, of course, for that would be when would that lease expire?
Yeah.
Of course, it might be such a long lease that it might not worry any of us. So
Yeah.
I honestly don't know, but I've got a feeling it's quite a long lease. I don't think it's from 99. I don't think it's 99, but I think it's probably quite long.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's just if it's there, we're looking at assets. We want to sort of sweat our assets as best.
oh,
as best we
absolutely,
can.
Yes.
absolutely.
Well, that's having a lot of.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, on the topic of cottages, there's a cottage attached to this building, right? Is that our town council's property?
It's not, it was purchased under the right to buy scheme.
Oh, I see.
So it's not, everybody thinks it's ours and it
You
isn't.
don't think so? Yeah, I get that.
Yes, I remember a discussion about this very early on when I came onto the council about
Yes.
that, because there's a number of people who thought that was probably ours and it's not. Yeah.
One day perhaps. It hasn't, changed since I've been here, 22 years since. We never approached anything, but have we? Never been offered it.
No. No, I don't think so.
That's fine.
No, as I said, it occurred to me when I saw it.
No, I think it's a very interesting point. It's interesting to know. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, it's a very interesting point is that it's the golf club.
So gatekeeper's cottage, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's yeah.
That's why it's there, I suspect.
And I just should state, I'm not a member of the golf club. I'm a member of another golf club in this way. This is we had declarations of interest earlier. I have no financial interest in it. I never played on that course.
That's right. And could, as we just confirmed, this will be confirmed to me beforehand, that the children's play equipment in, the sites at, Porter's Hill, Harbour and Valmwood were transferred on the 31st of March, which is why they are in these accounts. Because I was just trying to remember, the rest of the committee could remember as to exactly what date they were transferred, because obviously these accounts are at that the 31st of March. So that's right.
Yeah, that's correct. So
Yeah,
yeah, all four have been transferred over on the 31st of March.
Yes, that is correct. I'll just say that I'm always fascinated about the way that depreciation is accounted for in these accounts, because it doesn't follow any form of standard accounting practice that I'm aware of.
But it follows like government forms of standard accounting practices.
Follow any form of accounting that I'm aware of. Okay, can we on that basis agree? Agree the level of the reserves and the statement of the accounts. Are we happy with those? Thank you. Right. Internal audit report. That's officer.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased to say that we've received good assurance from our internal auditors again, with no recommendations. The only other point I was going to make a note is in paragraph 1.5, it mentions about the standing orders being reviewed by council, and that I can confirm that that's on the agenda to be reviewed in Monday after council. So just to confirm that that's definitely happening. But I have to take any questions.
Any questions on these?
Comment, well done. Yet again, no issues coming up at all. So that's what you want, one of those reports. So you got it.
It might be sometimes that there are comments made by the boards, which obviously they don't include in their report because they are significant. Have they made any other particular observations?
No, nothing's been made. I mean, there's been, I think, with the meetings that I've had with them, it's quite a smooth process now. I think with a bit more experience from me being here and dealing with them, it's okay. I supply them with all of the information, the data they need. They pick their sample and then go back with all the backing documentation. So it's all quite a smooth process now.
And on page 5 of 8, internal report, this always bugs me slightly. If there is something that is clearly a colour chart, it's all grey. Now, this is a very good thing. I mean, I know from the other comments that everything is in the good area, but you wouldn't know it by looking at that particular point.
Make some crossover or something.
I think I'm assuming because it is good assurance and that table isn't needed, they haven't paid too much attention to it. It's
all the same shade.
It's all the same shade. Yes, it is exactly the same shade. So I think they're not even completed, if in my view.
Is it possible it was photocopied without colour later on?
There's a colour
There's colour on the front page and there's colour on 8 of 8. So I think that is just their table. So I think if they were to complete that, maybe rather than it being colour coded, it might be ticks or crosses in the boxes as it goes through to say
Yes.
what's good and satisfactory, etc.
So I'm not unhappy about it not being colour printed, if that saves some money on the way, but it would be just to know what that table meant.
Yes.
Okay, we happy therefore to agree the internal audit result. Turnbull? that far, but you're entitled, you're fully entitled to an opinion. All right, the citizens' advice, update. Any usual report has been provided. Are there any questions on this?
It's not so much a question, it's a comment. It's a little bit like the last colour one. I think, I do normally spend some time over charts and stats, and I'm afraid the channel reference, which is given as percentages, you see on the left-hand side in the middle, both in Q4, and it's the same issue when you go to the annual one over the page. It says it's a percentage. Now, obviously, it clearly isn't a percentage, because it's up to more than 100. But I think what it is actually, I think it's even more than a proportion. I think that is potentially the number of for each channel. So I don't know why 66.2, but
No, it isn't. I don't, email is 66 cases and 22%.
oh, okay.
I was just looking at
Yes,
that
now
myself.
it makes sense.
210
Yes.
cases and 69%. And then
Yes.
in person 18 cases and 6%.
Well spotted. Yeah. Well,
So I think that's it. And then there's obviously some 3% of other, whatever that's to make it 100%. I think that's.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. So it's basically saying a large proportion of the total inquiries come in by phone. Which is, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I imagine most of them coming back home, so a number of people who will be approaching CAB won't necessarily have email connection.
Yeah.
Would be my.
Yes.
I mean, and I do think, we tend to forget that in this
Yes.
technological era, that some of the most vulnerable people in society do not have technology. Because it is very easily forgotten, is that.
But it's also, if you have a question, you don't know what to do, an email response is not gonna help you.
No. And the phone's a much better way.
Yeah, you need to, yeah.
And it depends who it is, and also it is, if you're not necessarily terribly confident of you're tapping things down and putting them written down, it is easier, isn't it, to pick up a phone and explain something to people than try and write it.
Agree with that.
Has this moved then from a lot of people coming in person? I thought,
Before the pandemic, I don't know if that in-person amount was a lot bigger, I don't know. It probably was, but I don't.
I'm not, it probably was. I mean, I'm trying to think, it's a long time since I did a tour of their offices and take around. I think probably quite a lot of initial contact is over the phone, because it's probably, if you like, almost a sort of triage,
yeah,
and then sort out who actually needs, if it's complicated, a certain proportion, presumably they can deal with over the phone. And then you have a proportion that you can't, and they need to go in. But it would be interesting to look historically to see if those have actually changed correctly.
whether that suits them, basically, people.
Am I right in thinking we used to have they were here a couple of days a week, they're not anymore? So you have to go to the Civic Centre in St Albans.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which case Hartland people, which is all this, are much more likely to, less likely to turn up in person, as you say, except after a need and an appointment, than somebody living more central St Albans who would walk along possibly.
It's always possible that the email, like really the initial contact, maybe thereafter, having got an email, you phone the person back to say, I've read the detail, can you explain this, can you explain that?
Yeah, because before COVID, I'm trying to remember where they used to have that. Was it at Salvation Army? Yes,
In Hartland.
yes.
Oh, I thought it was on St Albans.
They may have stopped during COVID, but prior to COVID, I think they had.
They had a presence in Hartlepool.
Yes, and I think it might have been, yes, and I think it might have been at Salvation Army. I'm not 100% sure.
One of the places it might have been.
It might have been. I honestly can't remember, but they did have that.
Well, somebody's supposed to be dressed. Okay, no more questions. We have happy to note the report. Right. application for community grant application for Rutlandstead Research Cafe Scientific. There's extensive background here. The original draft papers for this did include the 50 pages of the Rothamsted accounts. I decided in the interest of economy to attach those in this case was firstly a large waste of paper, secondly they're publicly available, and thirdly that this grant is so disproportionate to the size of those accounts that it's pretty meaningless to look at them, quite frankly. So I hope the committee was happy with me deleting and saving the whole original paper. However, let's take questions on this.
Well, I'm just going to kick off with another question and ask people what they think, because I'm finding it quite difficult to work out whether it meets the remit of our grants or not. I'm not very sure. I'm slightly puzzled by this, and slightly. I'm interested in Paul's views actually, because having an education background, but I can't, because I'm not absolutely certain who this is aimed at, in a way.
That was my conclusion. I couldn't quite work out whose benefit this was for.
Yeah, I would say it's quite clear in here. I love that as an idea to take it out of schools and out of institutions and into the general public. I think the only thing I would say is make sure that, and it will come through the schools and newsletters and things like that. Yeah, make sure that it's advertised appropriately.
I did agree with Rosemary actually when I was looking at this. I put it down to say I was thinking this is nice. I don't disagree with you. This is a nice thing to be going on.
Yes.
And for £1,000, I don't say it's hugely expensive. I was a bit puzzled. I mean, there's a reference to Rotherham in the first page, section A, towards the bottom. Rotherham Research is the primary academic institution in the Highland area. That's a brave shout. I mean, I think it's definitely it's a world-leading institution in terms of agricultural science, but to say academic institution, now, and I appreciate they might have just read it that way. But my question is, we've got, how many schools we've got in this area, both primary and secondary.
Yes.
If any of them were to say, we'd like to bring in a visiting speaker, to assemblies, I get that a lot in my county council role. I don't fund those because that could just go on and on and on.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering why, if this opens the door for us to say anything good and academic in the area going on in the public sector, except not private business. That's why I mentioned state schools.
Yes.
So do we know how they, what the contact is, how they approached us, how they thought that they I just wondered if it was like on spec, whether they'd had a conversation with someone.
No, they applied like anyone else. We just went onto the website and filled the form in.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I just don't feel I've got enough information to make it in a way.
How much is the limit? Is 1,000 whatever it now? I know we have
2,000 is the new.
What's the total budget for that one?
It's 8,000 a year.
Takes away.
Yes. And I suppose.
How much of it do we spend? Sorry, can we ask? I'll ask in the last few years, how much have we been spending all 8,000 typically?
I think there was. I'm not sure is the honest answer because of pre-COVID. I think over COVID, when I've been here over the last couple of years, there hasn't been as many applications because there hasn't been as much going on.
Yeah, can I ask another question? Is that money then rolled over, or is it just a discrete amount per year?
A bit of both. I think a lot of it has been rolled over in the earmarked reserves.
Yes, that's just what I held to know, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose what they're saying in this is because it is obviously meant to be used for a one-off thing, but I suppose they're saying they wanted to kickstart it.
Yes.
So they've done it before.
Not without help.
Oh, I see.
I think the first time we've been wanted to appreciate.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point though, isn't it? Because if we have 8,000 to spend on these things and someone asks for it and we're not spending it otherwise, then it's a bit rich to say, no, you've got to have it.
I think it's nice to have a link before from student on that
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a way we can sort of
And,
Keep things to
yes, and I mean, I can see as well, apart from the more generic, engaging people with science, I can see a virtue as well in specifically engaging people and awareness of what Rothamsted does.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I read this with a bit mixed feelings on this one. I can see but what they're trying to do. I think that's good. No issues with that. It's clearly something that is established elsewhere in the country. That's been relatively successfully applied elsewhere in the country. However, you know, we are here giving the grant to an organisation that made a £651,000 surplus last year in their own accounts. They're prepared to put up £500 for it. Interestingly, others, Cafe Scientifiques around the country, some of them do collect money at the door for attending, which they're not proposing to do here, though you might say, well, that's just kicking it off and have a look again. I'm also share the concern that, you know, we're paying here for basically speakers' travel and his sandwiches. And I wasn't sure that that was the right use of the community grant, and it does open the door to other similar things. So I was wasn't really quite sure which to put forward on this. I agree with Melanie that you know, if we've got this money, and particularly at this juncture, we should be seen to use it. We put it aside for community purposes, and in fact, I think we actually increased the pot in the light of the pandemic. That we thought we would get more claims. Mm-hmm. Now, the only claim I'm aware of to date was that one for the swimming club.
No, that's the only one I'm aware of.
So we've only actually used 1,000 of the 8,000. So that does go to Melanie's point about there's the money here, should it not be used somewhere in the community?
Is there a criteria and why it passed the criteria?
Yeah, so that was reviewed in January. I think it was November or January.
Are they specific how they're going to advertise this?
They did cover it somewhere.
They do.
Advertise the upper school students.
I think it goes around all the relevant institutions.
Yeah.
Without being selective.
Sorry, John. No, I won't interrupt you. You carry on. I was just going to raise another point, just say that to my mind, and I know I don't have children, so I'm not very well up on these things. It just seems the Harbenden Arms seems a slightly odd location.
Yes.
But I suppose if that's available and they've offered it.
Yeah.
Yes, if these people are, shall we say, under 18, yes.
There's that room upstairs.
Yes, oh, I'm sure they are doing that.
Oh, yes, I forgot that there is, isn't there? There's quite a big room
It can be done
upstairs.
perfectly legally, yes.
Yes,
it can.
there is, I've forgotten there's that quite big room upstairs.
It's generous of Harbenden Arms if they get
Yes.
under 18,
Yes.
because all you're going to sell is water and
Well, you hope,
lime and soda.
well, you hope that's what they're going to say.
Well, yeah.
Can I, Mr. Say, I was ambivalent on this. I thought, hold on, why are we doing this with Hampstead for £1,000? You thought they could put their hand in their own pocket. But maybe we do it as a one-off on the basis we have the money. But if they come back next year for another dollar, then we've got to say to them, hold on, let's just review exactly what you're doing and why you can't Hampstead.
Yes.
You know, what's your success rate and what's the purpose of it? Give us more details.
I'd like to see that.
One question, can they come back next year? They can't, can they? Is there a limit?
I don't think there's anything stopping them, but that would be the debate next year, depending on how successful it's been, or whether it's a slightly different project. And things like that.
Yes, and I mean, historically, it's slightly to one side, where we've had an organisation that's consistently come back for, I don't know, for instance, Classics on Common or something, they wanted, we actually do an SLA.
Yes.
Right.
That's not heading that way at the moment.
We're not heading that way, I'm just pointing out that when it is, usually, if you're going to have something that's going to be a repeat
That is.
sort of event, you start looking at it in a different way. Yes. You look at it doing it a different way, but I mean, I could live with that. I mean, I can see the virtues of it.
I think I agree with Councillor Turnbull's point that if we're going to do it, so we're leaning that way, we do it for a year and even if it's not in an SLA, we put 2 or 3 expectations down about what we want, some sort of brief report at the end of the year. I'd like to know how many events did they hold?
Yes,
How many,
Who were the speakers there?
yeah, who the speakers were, where they came from roughly, you know, which
Yes.
unis or whatever they came
Yeah.
from. And how many
Yeah.
attended, and I particularly want to know those attendees who were 18 or under, you know, school age.
Yes.
You know, because they do get a bit grandiose, and I don't mind that. I mean, it's great to have ambition, but when they say about how does this project promote equal opportunities, it's all good. It says, as a town, local residents have limited access within the community to scientific research.
that's what, yes,
Which we hope to, I think reading it the second time, it means they'll talk more about how scientific research is important and how it works. Because at first I thought it was that they were going to let, effectively like internships, you know, get to know some, which could be great, some keen students of science who they then say, you could do a summer intern and help us with some research, which I'd also support. But I'd like to know what they, if they talk about a bridge we hope to build, in the end, they need to say what they
In our town, we just magnificent researching. We're not linking someone along. We need to link the schools in
Yes,
if they're interested.
yes.
and it would be quite interesting for young people who might be interested, if say they're PhD students, because they do have the interns
Mhm.
at Rothamsted, who probably would be an interesting,
Yeah. Surprised it doesn't
interesting for for people from youngsters from the schools here who are thinking of perhaps doing some of those courses at the university, to have people they can talk to who have recently graduated.
Some of the schools are through the sciences, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other question is what happens if they don't spend it?
I like the idea of trying it for you.
Yes.
I-
If they don't spend it.
I think it's.
We don't
it's
change it.
returned.
I mean,
It's not spent, it's required to be returned.
Yeah.
Right, because the issue is that they're going to put £500 in, whose money gets returned.
It should be, our money should be returned.
Yes. I mean, we
Over
ought
there.
to, we ought to say that. I just want to encourage them therefore to use it. Okay, so what I'm hearing is I think generally we support this, but on the condition that we get some kind of report back as to the number of meetings, what they were on, who attended, age stratification,
And how the money was
how
spent.
it was spent.
And I don't know, I can't remember how we usually do these things, but I've looked when other sources of things, it would probably be useful to get some sort of interim report. Not wait till the end of the year, I'd say, after perhaps whilst we could have an update after 3 months or perhaps 6 months, say after 6 months.
I mean, it would be a shame, given the fact that they've been on for enough to get heart and lungs.
Yes, Yes,
For us to be the
yes.
ones being a bit sniffy.
Yes,
I agree.
They've gone
Yes.
that far.
I think it would just make us look a bit dog in the manger, wouldn't it?
Yes, and yeah, if they'd have just filled in, if somebody just filled in a form and said, let's see what graph. But they've obviously done some other
Yes.
work, so, yeah, credit to them.
I'm running free.
Yes, they are, well, they've obviously approached.
They've got
it.
they've got quite a big room upstairs.
They're
haven't they?
going to make a lot of money on lime and soda.
Yes, they're doing their bit.
Money coming into them, yeah. But leave that aside.
Okay, on that basis, we're all happy with that
Yeah.
proposal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, good. Next meeting, I think, September. Twenty-first, next meeting, 21st of September.
September 21st.
Okay, on that basis, thank you very much. Thank you. Good.
I may not be here that day, and if that's the case,